Jeff and I met in 1996. We were both seniors in high school. We were both in the same math class together. He was really, really funny, and many times in class, I would be caught talking to him and I would take the fall for it, and he thought that was hysterical. We quickly formed a friendship, got married in 2002. We started a family a couple years later. Evan was born in 2006, and then Cole followed a couple years later. I, was successful in my career. Jeff was successful in his career. And then, once Evan was born, everything changed. And that is all I wanted to do was be a mom. And that was one of the greatest things I ever did, was just to be able to spend time with my children. Jeff had this quiet, gentle spirit about him. Everyone that came in contact with him left feeling better about themselves, and he just had this way with people that you were the most important person in his life. The courage and bravery that I saw at a young age, I realized just his quiet strength that would serve us well when tragedy came. Jeff was working full-time. I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and life was good. Life was perfect. We had a strong marriage. We had a strong, deep faith, and we had two beautiful boys. And, everything was perfect in our world. The kids were in elementary school, so they were just getting started with climbing. They're both elite-level rock climbers. All of our weekends were packed with traveling with our boys and their sporting events. And they had a national championship out in Salt Lake. And this particular trip, after Evan was finished competing, we decided to ski for the day. So we took off at Park City, Utah, and we skied. And that's when we first noticed that there was a problem, something going on with Jeff. Skiing that day, he fell and couldn't get up. And he thought something was off, but it's skiing, and it's really difficult in general, if you're skiing, to get up from a fallen position. And so we thought a little bit about it, but then dismissed it and enjoyed the rest of our trip. And Jeff just realized slowly that he was getting weak in his right shoulder. And so immediately after that trip, he had an MRI done on his shoulder, and the results came back clear. Nothing was wrong. The surgeon just really looked into his case a little bit more and thought, there's something is going on here. We need to explore a little bit further. Based off of our first appointment at a neurologist, she sent him to have an EMG done. And it's essentially they put needles into your arm just to test your muscles. And it was an urgent referral to the ALS clinic. I'll never forget the day the phone call came in. Jeff was at work, and I had just finished teaching a fitness class. And he called me from the office, and he said, I just got a call from the neurologist, and it's not good. He said, it's ALS. He had no idea what ALS was. He's like, I just Googled it, and I'm coming home. We took a couple days to just weep, and grieve heavily over this new direction that we were heading. And then we decided, even just as a couple, that this is our life, this is our story now, and it's not the life that we would have chosen. It's not the life we ever wanted. So how do we learn to love the life that we never wanted? My initial fears were, ultimately, I'm going to be a single mom. And even throughout the diagnosis and throughout ALS, a single parent, because as Jeff loses all of his abilities, that all falls on me. My fear was spending 5-6 years with ALS and then Jeff is gone, my kids are gone because they're leaving for school. And so it's just a very real fear that I've spent this large portion of my life serving my husband and my boys, and then I'm left alone. And it's a very scary place to be. You go from being a wife and a mother, and those roles still have to continue, to also being a caregiver. And so all of your roles that you've fallen into are now completely shifted. I really struggled, and Jeff did too, with our roles now. And so, how does this change our relationship as husband and wife? And that's going to change. Being a good mom when my heart was broken and still is broken is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We had to shift very quickly and not to live in this place of despair. And that's it's so easy to do, and it's okay to do, but we knew we had a very short window of 2 to 5 years, and we wanted to figure out how, as a couple and as a family, to live well in these circumstances, to suffer well, because we all were going to suffer. Jeff was going to suffer, I'm going to suffer, the kids are going to suffer, and then ultimately to finish well. And those are the 3 things that we decided on as a family. We wanted to live well, suffer well, and finish well. With ALS, you slowly lose the ability to move. By the time we took our trip out west, Jeff was completely paralyzed. We had to shave him. We had to brush his teeth, to dress him. I would spin 18 miles and I would hike to the top of Half Dome with one child. And then the other child stayed home with Jeff. And so he really had one-on-one time with one, and I had one-on-one time with the other. And then the next day, we would switch. We didn't want them to look back on our life and say, my dad had ALS, and that be the end of the story. There's more to it than that. And I wanted them to see a mom who didn't give up and who fought for everything. I wanted them to have experiences in life and not miss out because a disease was ravaged in our home. And Jeff wanted the same. Even though he went from a participant in life to an observer of life, he took that role so well in order for us to keep moving forward. I was in this position of, do I move forward with my family and my kids, or do I stay behind with Jeff? And where do I fit in all of this? And Jeff kept encouraging us to keep going, keep moving, and keep living life. And because of the way that he lived, because of the grace that he had, the gentleness that he had, the leadership that he pushed us to keep moving forward, even if it was without him. I think about him every single day. I'm sure the boys do. Jeff taught me to be a mom who trusts Jesus over perfection, to live knowing that we have an eternity ahead of us, and that's what our focus should be. Without him here now, life is really, really hard. We miss him, but we still feel him. We still feel his guidance. Even through ALS, when Jeff lost everything, he still had this ability to lead and teach. And he taught us to live that way and to love and to serve recklessly.
Hey, could you join with me in welcoming Tara?
Oh, thank you.
Tara, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that is such a powerful story. Every time I watch it, it just touches me so much. So thank you for being willing to just kind of open up your life to share with the rest of us. And happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
To you. So good to have you with us.
Thank
and
you
I
so
know
much.
that your story is going to touch us and really challenge us. I know it challenges me, but just encourage us regardless of who we are. And so I'd really kind of like to get things kicked off by just hearing a little bit more about your boys. We see just kind of a brief snapshot of them kind of at the very end of that video, but tell us a little bit about your boys.
Yeah, this is every mom's dream to talk about their kids, right?
That's right.
They're probably squirming in their seat right now. So, so I've got two boys, Evan and Cole, and Evan is my 16-year-old. He is a sophomore at Westfield High School. New driver in the house, so you probably know what that's like. And he's got,
Picture them.
yeah,
Rock
so Evan is a competitive rock climber, and he competes on both the youth circuit and the men's circuit. And so we're actually leaving in 3 days for the World Cup. So he is going to be competing against the best of the best.
That's awesome.
In the world. So.
And he from what I understand, he climbs that wall in 6 seconds?
So his PR right now is 5.8 seconds.
5.8 seconds. So. It would take me 20 minutes.
Right. I did try it at one point just to see. It took me a minute and a half, and I still didn't finish.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's still pretty impressive.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Well, that's amazing.
And Evan is, he has the best characteristics of both Jeff and I. I would say, from me, he gets this strength and this drive and this work ethic that is unmatched. And then from his dad, he is so humble and gentle and has this quiet leadership, and really, really proud of him. And then Cole is my 14-year-old. He's an 8th grader at Westfield Middle School. And he also is a competitive rock climber. He just got back last night, around 11:30 last night from Cleveland. He was in the regional championships. Both boys were able to advance, and so they'll be competing in the divisional championships coming up. So this is Cole. And Cole also has the best characteristics of both Jeff and I. He has this willpower and mental fortitude. He and I are this born of the same cloth. If you tell us not to do something, we're going to do it twice and take pictures. And so, that you're strong-willed children, that was me, that is Cole. These are the kids that are going to save the world, right? So,
yeah.
And, he has the heart of his dad. That's the most defining characteristic. We love to talk about Jeff and his heart, and that is Cole. And he has his dad's heart, and he loves really hard, really deep. And his, his humor, sense of humor and quick wit is Jeff's. And his graciousness, he's just so grateful for anything that you do for him.
I love that. I love that.
So
So
thank you for letting me talk about my boys.
Yeah. Well, and Evan and Cole, thanks for sharing your mom with us. And I know it's not an easy thing to have your pictures plastered all over a screen, but we really appreciate that, and we're pulling for you guys. And they're also, from what I understand, are they both being baptized?
They are.
Next hour.
They're both being baptized next hour. And I just have to say, this has been an emotional week for me, not only just preparing to be here, but just knowing what we've been through, and as children, what they've carried, the weight of the world on their shoulders, and what most children will never have to bear. And still they say, God, you are good. God, I trust you. God, I don't understand, but I'm all in. Yeah. And that's just, as a mom, I'm so proud.
Yeah.
I'm so proud.
You should be. So, that's amazing.
Thank you.
So, well, what I want all of you to know is that, Tara's not just an outside guest speaker. She's family. They've been a part of our church for, 16 years?
Almost 17 years. I was sitting way up in the balcony with a baby, your very first, could we call it your trial run here, maybe?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've tried to block it out. But, yeah, so it's been amazing to have you here. And I know that Mother's Day can be, a mixed bag of emotions for all of us for a wide variety of reasons. We want to make sure that we celebrate our moms because they deserve it. And yet I also know at the same time, this is a heavy day for a lot of people, grieving for any number of reasons. And so I know this is the first Mother's Day for you without Jeff.
Yes.
And so I want to thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about what did Mother's Day mean for you? And what was it like for you, prior to Jeff's diagnosis, and then now that Jeff is no longer here with us? What's it like?
So Evan and Cole were 8 and 10 at diagnosis, so they were babies. And traditionally on Mother's Day, we would come to Traders Point, and then just our traditional brunch together. And I loved getting my flower pots ready for spring. But I have to be honest, moms of moms really do a lot of the work. So my mom would always come over, and she's the one who did all the planting. She's the one who took care of all the flowers for me. But I just enjoyed that process. But for any major holiday milestone event, our family is really active. So we would spend time either on a long hike, bike ride, run. We just pack the kids. And so that's traditionally how we would spend even Mother's Day. And I have to say that last year was very, very different for me. I was 5 years into ALS. And each year I just, put on a smile and hid the pain and just went about the day. And last year was different. We came home from Traders Point. I went into my room, shut the door, closed the blinds, turned off the lights, and I went to bed. And I was sad. I felt sorry for myself. I was sad for me. I was sad for Jeff. I was sad for the boys. And I just took time to grieve. And I spent a couple hours. And so I just want to say, if that's you today, take the time to grieve. Mother's Day can bring all kinds of emotion, from loss of a child, a mom, strained relationships, inability to have a child, and single moms and even widows. And maybe even you're a mom today that's going through the unimaginable, a life-changing diagnosis yourself. And I just want to say that I acknowledge that. I think one of the most beautiful things, one of the most beautiful text messages or phone calls that I ever received throughout ALS was someone just saying, "Hey, Tara, I see you. I see your pain," or even, "I see how hard you're working, and I know that's difficult." So just that acknowledgement didn't take away the pain, but it helped ease it. Yeah. And so, I just wanted to acknowledge that and encourage you and hope that you can participate in an activity today that honors what you've been through, and then grieve if you need to grieve.
Yeah, that's so good. And it reminds me a lot of what Paul writes to us in 2 Corinthians 12. He says there's this thorn in his flesh.
Yes.
And he's asking God, would you please take it away? And God says no, or he stays silent on it. And then he says, my power is made perfect in that weakness. I love that verse, and I hate that verse all at the same time.
Right.
There's that thing where it's if I got a thorn in my flesh, I'm God, remove it. And you'd want God to remove it. And then he just says, but my power gets displayed in the midst of that weakness. And I think that we see a lot of that, I think even at work, in your life and through this season. And allowing God to take something that I think part of what's so moving about your story is, this kind of news is devastating. And I think all of us, as I'm watching the video, I'm thinking to myself, how would I have responded? How would I have reacted in the midst of that kind of news? And you allowing God to work in your life in that season. And now you're, I don't want to say you're beyond it. I just want to say you're in a different season of that.
Yeah, I think, Jeff's concern was my suffering is almost over, and your suffering will continue. And, Christ's power has been able to be seen all throughout ALS. And I think as a mom throughout ALS, I felt inadequate as a mom, as a wife, and as a caregiver. And what the Lord taught me was that he wasn't looking for my strength, my natural abilities, or even my bravery. He wanted me to depend on him. Mm-hmm. And this deep and complete dependence on him just led to profound worship and a deeper relationship than we ever would have known without pain. And, our strengths, God gives us both strengths and weaknesses, but it's our weaknesses that if we give that to him, his power it's absolutely remarkable what he's done throughout ALS. And I think so many people have told us, "You're the strongest person I know," or "I would not have been able to do what you did with your family." Or even looking at Jeff, he became the weakest person I knew, and yet he was the strongest man I've ever known. And that's the power of Christ. Like, there was nothing that we did. It was his power that sustained us.
Yeah. And I would imagine when people said that to you, did you feel like the strongest person?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
I wouldn't think so.
No.
But your outlook is inspiring. You know, I know we mentioned it real briefly in the video. We've talked about it individually, especially like the national parks trip.
Right.
In the summer of 2020, 21 national parks.
21 national parks.
I told you earlier this week, you know, in summer of 2020, I was at home feeling sorry for myself.
Right.
And you're out, hiking Half Dome with your boys and your husband. And that just is an incredible outlook, I think, to have in the midst of all that. I think when a lot of people, go through really trying circumstances, it's easy to sort of, go the opposite, and maybe lean a little bit more into those feelings and emotions that we have of weakness. And, one of the things I really appreciate about you guys have written a book. We've actually got it available at all of our campuses. I love the title, Finish Well.
Thank you.
So you said that's Jeff's handwriting.
That's it, Jeff's handwriting.
That's so good. Talk to us a little bit about the book. Like, what was the inspiration behind it? Who was it for? How did you guys write it?
So 6 months after diagnosis, some friends and family gifted us a trip, some time away together. So Jeff and I sat poolside for 4 days, and we just started drafting notes, letters, and even guidance to our boys. And this was just something that we started. It wasn't intended to be published. It was meant for 2 copies, one for Evan, one for Cole. And, we knew that Jeff's presence would be missing from a significant portion of their life. And even as they navigated just some crucial milestones, going through their dating years, marriage, what their responsibility will be as a husband and as a father. And then even just the importance of faith and family and their relationship with the Lord. And so, like I mentioned in the video, we didn't want our boys to say, my dad had ALS. And that's the end of the story. And, it's easy to look back on our life and see all that we've accomplished. And we didn't want them to say, my parents are amazing. And we wanted them to see who showed up. We wanted to see them to see who sustained us during our darkest hour. We wanted them to see answered prayers and unanswered prayers, everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. And even just the vulnerable, broken moments.
Yeah.
And so that was the purpose of the book. And I remember a sermon that you preached years ago, and you said something along the lines of, when your life is a story that will be told one day, let's make sure it's a story worth telling. And so that's what we did.
Wow.
And we wanted to live our life in such a way that this is our life. We don't understand it. We're hurting deeply, but we wanted to live well, suffer well, and then ultimately to finish well.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that phrase. You've mentioned it multiple times. It's obviously in the title of the book.
Yes.
Live well. We're all going to live. We want to live well. We're all going to suffer.
That's right.
That's just inevitable. So we want to suffer well, and then we want to finish well, which just comes right out of like the book of James. And so, as you're in the midst of ALS, talk to us about what that looked like, and then now that you're in this different season, what does it look like now? To live well, suffer well, finish well.
So with live well, we first needed to define what it meant to live well within our circumstances. And Jeff and I had coined this phrase that we actually had printed and hung in our bathroom so that we could look at every single day, and it simply says, was I faithful today with what I've been given? And so ALS is what we'd been given. And so everyone's going to be given something different, whether that's abundance or, for us it was ALS. And so how do we live our life now under these circumstances? And, like most families, we worked hard, played hard, went on trips, and those are all really, really good and important things. I mean, we pour into our children and their sporting events, and traveling with my boys all across the nation, and now hopefully across the world. And even just in preparing for this week, I read the statistic that said, 0.02% of the population will ever play a professional sport, and yet 100% of us will stand before a holy God. And that just really put things into perspective. And so now when I have that perspective, like, I'm still going to pursue sports with my children. I'm still going to follow them around the world, but now I'm looking at it through a different lens and through this, different priorities and perspectives. And so, there was nothing extraordinary about our life, but we lived the ordinary very, very well.
Yeah.
And I think for most of us, we're not going to be called for anything extraordinary, but to live faithfully in our circumstances.
Yeah.
And so, when we leave this earth, we're going to leave something behind. We have no choice. And so we wanted to live in such a way that it had eternal impact. So really focusing on our relationships with our friends, with our family, and most importantly, a relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And so that's what it meant for us to live well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that I think that you probably see, what happened to Jeff as a gift in some aspects from the sense of a point of clarity.
Right.
I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer several years ago, and he was saying, everybody's coming up to me saying, I'm so sorry. And he's just like, look, we're all gonna die. I've just been given a little bit of clarity. Like most of us can't see the edge of the cliff.
Right.
But you get a diagnosis like this, you can see it, and it puts everything in perspective.
Everything in perspective.
And so you're not necessarily living life on autopilot. You're being really, really intentional, which is what I hear you saying.
Yes.
And so, so living well, making the most of every opportunities in front of us, because we're not guaranteed another minute of life here. Talk to us a little bit more about, just that idea of like finishing well.
Yeah.
What's that look like?
Well, if I could touch on suffer well just before we hit into finish well, because the suffering piece, that's probably one thing that most people don't look at. I mean, who wants to suffer? And how do you suffer well? And I first want to say, there are many days we got that wrong. And, we would go to bed at night, kiss each other goodnight with apologies on our lips, and our hearts were just shattered by the sheer hardness of the day, and we just make a vow to try again in the morning. And if you talk to any family in crisis, they'll tell you a million stories of how they thought they couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And yet there are beautiful examples that have come as a result of ALS. And it is not lost on me, the life experiences, the travels, the outfit I'm wearing today, afforded to us because of our circumstances. And so it's this joy and pain, right, that collides. And just this the aspect of suffering, how do you suffer well? And it's our hope that as people saw how we responded to trial and tragedy, that they saw Christ. As they saw how Jeff and I, our relationship was as husband and wife, and how I was as a caregiver, and how he received that, or how our relationship with our children, that they saw Christ. And persevering faith leaves its mark on those around us. And so when a watching world sees that you get a no from God, and yet your faith still remains strong, and you still endure to the end, they take note of that.
Yeah.
And it sends this clear message of hope. And while that doesn't take away your pain, I'm still hurting, and I will hurt this side of eternity. Jeff and I decided to look at, what does the Bible say about who God is? God is holy, God is just, God is faithful. And then what does the Bible say about his promises? God promises he is near to the brokenhearted. God promises to be faithful. God promises he hears us when we call. He promises there's purpose in our pain. And so we longed to have this faith that wasn't contingent upon our circumstances, but based on what we know to be true about our good and faithful Father. And so if we believe that God is who he says he is, and if we believe the Bible to be true, then we must believe God is writing a better story than we ever could. I mean, I would be a terrible God. I'd be like, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, right? I mean, so that was our desperate prayer, was like, please take this from us. And we got to know.
Yeah.
But we've seen so much beauty through it.
Yeah.
And so that was the suffer piece. And then the finish well portion, anyone can finish well. And I'm a fitness instructor, and I use this analogy with my clients all the time. My athletes come in, and anyone can put on a pair of shoes, grab a dumbbell, get on a treadmill, put on some boxing gloves, and start well. You've got high energy. you're strong. Most of us want to be there maybe at the start of the workout, right? But what does it look like the last 2 minutes when you're tired, when you're weak, when you want to stop? And so it's this finish. The finish is what's most important. I mean, look at the thief on the cross, right? He had a bad start in life, but he finished well.
Yeah.
And so, one of my favorite verses is 2 Timothy 4 is, I have fought the fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith.
Yeah.
And, that's how we wanted to parent in those circumstances is like, imagining like you are in this race. It's like the race of your life, right? You're coming around the track, finish line is in sight, full sprint. Now, most of us are probably going to be crawling or limping in this world as we make our way to the finish.
Yeah.
Eyes on the finish, the crown of righteousness awaits. And so that's how we wanted to parent, was keeping the end in mind and knowing that when we cross that finish, we receive the crown of righteousness.
Yeah.
And parenting in such a way that maybe we shift and say, what did I do today? Or what did I do this week that will matter in eternity?
Yeah.
And nothing else matters.
That's right. That's so good. And I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you using like the sports analogies that I think Paul was an athlete, or at least a wannabe athlete.
Right.
Because he used so many analogies around that. And there is like a marked difference like between working out by yourself and working out with others.
Right.
There's always, I think when we're cheering each other on, when you're kind of looking out of the corner of your eye, see what somebody else is kind of doing, it kind of pushes you and prompts you. But I think there's a lot of parallels to that, when it comes to faith and just the community of faith. I just want to even say to somebody right now who may be, limping or on your knees or on the sidelines, and a big part of why we gather, every week is to stir each other up, to say, man, keep going. Like, you get on your feet, lean on me so you can continue to move. And I think that's a great, I want to shift gears just a little bit to talk about the role of community in your life, because I know that a natural reaction for so many of us, I'd include myself in this, is that when we're hurting, when we go through crisis, there's a very natural reaction that we all have. It's human, and that is to withdraw. I hear that from people a lot, as we've gone through whatever we've gone through over the last 3 years. You're going through a personal crisis in your life. You're like, I'm just going to withdraw. You stop coming to church, or you stop showing up to group, or whatever it may be. And so talk a little bit, Tara, about the role of community in your life and how you sought that out. What did it look like during those really intense days of ALS with Jeff?
Yeah.
Now, what does it look like now in your life now that he's gone on to be with the Lord?
Yeah, this posture of surrender is very difficult. It's, saying that I can't do this on my own and admitting that. God, I need you. Family, I need you. Friends, I need you. And, I felt like I just had outstretched hands. I had nothing. I had nothing to give but to receive. And knowing that the only reason that we're thriving today is because of the generosity of others and not because of anything that I've done is really hard. And it's almost like God was taking us by the shoulders and was, like, that's what I do best. Like, this is the gospel story. This is the salvation story. This is a gift, but you have to receive it. And I had a really good friend of mine going through terminal cancer at the time, and she just said, hey, Tara, do you have a meal train? A simple meal train. And I said, no, we're 1 month into diagnosis. I need people for the long haul. And so I didn't want to wear people out. This is going to be a 5-6 year battle, perhaps. And she said, Tara, I want you to hear something. You're going to lose. No matter what people do for you, you're still going to lose. And she said, you're going to lose your husband. The boys are going to lose their dad. Let people help. I didn't cook a meal for 5 years. And, I think for me, if someone brought me something, I felt like I needed to be busy. For me to sit down and have a conversation with my husband or engaging with my children and somebody's bringing me something, I was embarrassed by it. I felt like I needed to be busy. And, what I've learned through all of this is I had to let go of control of things that I normally had control over. And, having meals come to my home or people running my kids to and from practice, cleaning my home, house maintenance, you name it. Those not being able to do those things didn't make me a bad mom. I was still a good mom, and relying on others didn't change that. It made me a supported mom. And so the more I was supported, I was able to engage with my husband, engage with my kids, and I was able to grieve. I had time to grieve because of others. And, I still need help today. I'm a single mom, and I can't do it alone. And so, I think the most important thing I ever heard Jeff say his final week was, Tara, I am not worried about you and the boys. And for a man to say that, someone who's the spiritual leader of your home, the financial leader of your home, for him to be able to leave this world knowing he's leaving this world, and he's like, I'm not concerned because I've seen what God can do. And so whenever I get worried and nervous and scared, I remember that. I look back, look at all God has done for us and how he has shown up. And I still need help. I mean, a neighbor called the other day and said, hey, I've got 2 bags of salt for your water softener. I told Jeff I would take care of you and the boys, and I meant it.
Wow.
And, we've got a dear family friend who meets Evan every single week and goes to his climbing practice, mentors him, takes him out to dinner. God is still showing up. God is still filling in the gaps. And this book has countless examples of the same.
Yeah, I love that. So as you're navigating life, I'm sure you probably never imagined you'd be a single mom.
No.
So as you're navigating that, how's your perspective changed?
Pain has this way of shaping and refining you. And going through deep suffering, you learn to appreciate true joy. So it's this joy in pain. And so now our life is fuller, our relationship's stronger, our faith is deeper, all because of brokenness. And so when you have known this deep despair, you learn to value and appreciate hope. So joy and pain and this hope and despair, right? But this eternal perspective is really what has changed for us. And from the beginning, finish well was kind of our family motto. And in the throes of ALS, sometimes you can be so consumed with how hard things are. We couldn't see past our pain. It was so challenging that there were times where Jeff would say, I don't want to live like this forever. And I had said the same, I don't want to do this forever. And hindsight is 2020. We're on the other side of that now. And while there's a different form of pain for sure, it's almost like God was saying, Tara, I wasn't asking you to live this way forever. I was asking you to endure for today. And that's not to minimize any pain at all, because oftentimes, we can say, pain is temporary, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it. And, we wanted to have this eternal mindset, and that really solidified for us. I'll never forget Jeff's final moments when his heart stopped beating and mine continued. And I realized in that moment, it was the greatest day of his life and the worst day of mine. But I was so thankful that his body was healed from this disease and that he's ultimately where I want to be with his Heavenly Father, right?
Yeah.
But how often do we think about that? How often do you think about heaven? So before ALS, I would have told you, absolutely, I want to go to heaven, but that's, after. Life is good here.
Yeah.
My marriage is good. My faith is great. I want to spend time with my children. I want to see my children grow up and have children. I want to see my children have payback for their children, right? I mean, so.
Amen. Yeah.
And the ALS shifted that mindset very, very quickly. I'm ready now. But if I could be honest, if he could come in 2 years so I don't have to pay college tuition, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
So, but, I think the best way I can put this into perspective is, say you come home from Traders Point today and we're going to do a new church plant, but it's across the world. Yemen, right? So you come home and you tell Lindsay, we're moving to Yemen. So imagine the moving truck comes, cargo ships are loaded, and you get in the car, you're heading to the airport. And imagine you both look at each other and say, what do you know about Yemen? And imagine you shrugging your shoulders and saying, well, I don't know, we'll figure out when we get there. That's absurd. Like, this is where you're going to spend the rest of your life, and you didn't research it, you didn't Google it, you know? And I think that's what we do about heaven. Like, this is where we're gonna spend millions and millions and millions of years, and we're so focused on this life here.
Yeah. That's such a good word. That's such a good word. You know, as we begin to kind of, you know, wrap up our conversation, I want you to, you know, speak to maybe in particular, like if there are any women listening to this today and they're grieving, and there could be any number of, they're in pain, they're in crisis, they're grieving, what word of encouragement would you say to them today?
Oh, to moms with a broken heart, I just want to say, this is not the life you wanted. You did not have in your future plans loss, inability to conceive. You didn't know the love of your life would walk out the door and leave you to parent alone. You didn't know just how hard it would be to parent a child with, you know, just a medically fragile child, or autism, ADHD, CP. And life is very, very challenging. Perhaps you lost a mom, disease, accident. And I just want to say that I am so sorry that you are loved, you are adored, and you are not alone, although you most definitely feel that way. And if I could just offer a few pieces of advice, it would be one, you know, take time to grieve. Say all of your it's not fairs, because it's not, and then wash your face and live well. Number two would be ask for help. God never sent anyone out on a solo mission. We need each other, so ask for help. I would also say be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. You're grieving, and so really be kind to yourself, especially in this season. Don't do this alone. I would say get together with other people who have similar circumstances, and even if not, you know, someone who can say me too, but even if it's not that, just someone who can sit with you in your pain and show empathy and kindness and compassion. And then finally, listen for God's voice, because he's listening. He wants you to rely on him. And keep your eyes on the finish, and finish well.
I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, Tara, I can't believe our time's already up. That went by like so fast. And so I just want to thank you for being willing to just be so vulnerable to share your story with us and just encourage us in this way. I think the ripple effects of this conversation, I think, are gonna be really significant for so many people for such a long time. So thank you for that. Can we give it up for Tara one more time? Just appreciate that. And so receive that.
Wow. Thank you.
We have limited numbers of copies of these at every campus, so grab one of these on your way out. Tara has, I know at each of our campuses, you don't have the opportunity to be there physically with them, but our campus pastors will be there. There'll be people to pray with you, meet with you. Here at Northwest, Tara's just agreed just to be down front, just to be available. And so if there's anybody that would like to speak with her, pray with her, she'll be down front for a period of time between services. Tara, would you do us the honor of just praying for us today?
I would love to.
Yeah.
Father, we love you. You are so, so good. God, it doesn't mean that we won't go through pain in this life. In fact, you told us we will have pain in this world, but we surrender to you. God, please help us to know that this is not our final story. And to the women who are hurting, Lord, would you please draw near? Would you bring other people into their life to help carry their burdens? And may they know that they are not a burden. They have a burden. And by definition, burdens are heavy. And they need help. God, for all of us, keep our eyes on the finish. Eternity is right in front of us. Help us to live well, to suffer well, and to finish well for your glory. God, we are so excited for heaven, and until then, we are called to be ambassadors of your kingdom. Lord, we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen, amen. Hey, you guys, have a great Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Enjoy the day, and we will see you here next weekend as we kick off a new series. Have a great day.